The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe it.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
We also need to end the unwritten rule of politics that says that anyone who wants to run for office has to start by sucking up to a bunch of rich donors on Wall Street and powerful insiders in Washington. So, I'm opting out of that rule. I'm not taking a dime of PAC money in this campaign. There's more. I'm not taking a single check from a federal lobbyist. I'm not taking applications from billionaires who want to run a super PAC on my behalf. And I challenge every other candidate who asks for your vote in this.
Oh.
Corporations aren't people. People are people.
What happened to her? What happened? What happened? Oh. Well, hi, everybody. Happy Monday, you bastards. Happy Monday. It was a big weekend. It was really, really big. Not only did Elizabeth Warren announce that she's running for president in freezing cold Lawrence, Massachusetts, but even to outdo on the cold scale, oh, man, an idiot boy Twitler, you know, he's like, there is no global warming because Amy Klobuchar made her announcement in sub-zero weather as well in Minnesota, right on the banks of the Great Mississippi, which a lot of people don't realize goes all the way up there. But it was just amazing. Look at Amy. Amy standing in the snow. Oh.
My family story is like so many of yours. On both my mom and my dad's side, they arrived in this country with nothing but a suitcase.
We didn't even have a suitcase.
But they made a home here. It was cold. Okay, maybe not as cold as this. They didn't know anyone, but like so many immigrants, they wanted a better life for their families. My grandpa worked 1,500 feet underground in the mines up north on the Iron Range. He never graduated from high school. He saved money in a coffee can in the basement to send my dad to college.
I do that.
My dad, who's here at age 90, got a 2-year degree from Vermillion Junior College and then finished up at the great University of Minnesota. He became a journalist. As a young, thank you, person cheering. As a young Associated Press reporter, he called the 1960 presidential race for John F. Kennedy. He covered the 1968 conventions. He interviewed everyone from Mike Ditka to Hubert Humphrey to Ronald Reagan to Ginger Rogers. Freedom of the press wasn't some abstract idea to my dad. He embraced it. He lived it. My mom, a proud union member, taught second grade in the suburbs until she was 70 years old. Her students, now grown, still come up to me on the street and tell me she was their favorite teacher. So today, on an island in the middle of the mighty Mississippi, in our nation's heartland, at a time when we must heal the heart of our democracy and renew our commitment to the common good, I stand before you as the granddaughter of an iron ore miner, as the daughter of a teacher and a newspaperman, as the first woman elected to the United States Senate from the state of Minnesota, to announce my candidacy for President of the United States.
There are so many women to choose from. It's like an embarrassment of riches, isn't it? We have 5 women. It's like the next season of The Bachelor. I've never seen. We have 5 women to choose from. You may not realize we have Tulsi Gabbard. You got Kamala Harris. You've got Elizabeth Warren, who announced officially over the weekend, also on Sub-Zero. You have Kirsten Gillibrand from New York, and then Amy Klobuchar. I mean, it's so amazing. I've never seen so many women running for president of the United States. It is like the new season of the That's what this primary for us, for the Democrats, will be. It'll be like, and speaking of The Bachelor, you do have Cory Booker. Anybody? Cory Booker. He's a bachelor. Yes. Cory Booker is an unmarried man. And I think we only had one bachelor president, and his name was James Buchanan. Not a great track record there. No. James Buchanan, I believe, was always referred to as the worst president that we've ever had, prior to Richard Nixon, W, and Trump. Oh my God, there are so many Democrats running. It's going to be really good because, we get to pick. Not by the party isn't picking the people for us for once. People are stepping up. People are actually running. People are offering what their policy visions are. People are saying what they will concentrate on, how they will govern, what their priorities are. And I have never seen anything like this in the Democratic Party, because the machine typically selects, a handful of people, and there you have it. And then by the time the election rolls around, out of a country of 300 and some odd million people, you get 2. So we will end up with 2, maybe 3, if Howard Schultz continues with this. Now, Howard Schultz is doing a town hall, I think, tomorrow night. Tonight, the night will be owned by Donald Trump, who is going down to El Paso to debate everyone who lives and works and governs in El Paso about the big lie that he told about El Paso and a wall, and that the second he built the wall, or the second a wall got built there, that is just not true. Everyone knows that is not true. The Republican mayor of El Paso knows it's not true. He was on the TV this weekend. He was timid. He was mealy-mouthed. He was, yellow-bellied. But he managed to say that, no, it isn't true that El Paso had to build a wall to combat crime. In fact, crime was falling precipitously to the point where El Paso was the safest medium-sized city in the United States prior to the building of a freaking wall. But we'll get there. I'll play that for you. In the meantime, I was very heartened by Elizabeth Warren's focus. Now, I will tell you, Amy Klobuchar, while I respect her, and she did a great job at the Kavanaugh hearings. You remember, Kavanaugh was like, snarky to her, just like Whitaker. Oh, my God. We have clips from the Whitaker thing that happened last week that we didn't have a chance to cut up until this weekend. What a piece of crap this man is. What a douche. That's my new favorite word, and it's because of him. They're calling him, they aren't, Maureen Dowd. In the New York, she called him Daddy Warbucks. And you know what? That is who he looks like. If he doesn't get a job on Fox News, which I'm sure is what he was angling for, because Bill Shine is the communications director, acting, of course, for Donald Trump, and Bill Shine will phone up, his compatriots over there at Fox News, where he came from, to tell them, Whitaker was a loyal soldier and we really ought to put him in there, and you really ought to give him an analyst spot or whatever it is. If he doesn't end up doing that, then maybe they could cast him in a remake of Annie on Broadway, because he does look like Daddy Warbucks. He's a creepy guy with a shady past. And I swear to God, the Republicans, this one Republican, this Representative Collins Jude, ran interference for him, which we were able to show you, but it was worse than I thought. It was terrible. It was mind-blowingly deceptive, and it was obstruction, and it was obfuscating, and all those words. It was vile. It was absolutely vile. But since Elizabeth Warren stepped up, and Amy Klobuchar stepped up over the weekend, I thought we would start with that, just to let you know. Amy Klobuchar is she's probably had, well, I think this is a fact, that she has had more legislation passed and signed into law than any other senator. Isn't that something? It's crazy. She's a very, very hard worker. And, it's like my daddy told me. Now, her daddy was a newspaper man. My daddy was an electronic engineer. And in his world, right, they were the Silicon Valley guys back in the day, inventing things like the flash cube for the Polaroid camera and computer-aided design, where you could, put something on a screen and have it designed and etched out a polymer, in a vat of polymer, just from what you drew on your computer. Those were the Silicon Valley dudes. So back in the day, they liked, it's sort of like, the Bezos guys. It's sort of like, they like the good-looking girls. And my daddy always told me, your sister's very pretty and she's not very smart. She'll marry well. You, on the other hand, you're not so pretty and you're very smart. Men don't like that. Get a career. So Amy Klobuchar is one of the hardest-working senators. So Natch, they started trashing her on the Twitter, saying she's a tough boss. She's tough. Now, I can't imagine Donald Trump was a walk in the woods. I can't imagine that he's a piece of cake. I can't imagine that, a lot of the men who, whip their staff into shape are called, any of those words that, But Amy Klobuchar has been, because she's very hardworking. Very hardworking. Her issues are, obviously, she's all about privacy in media. That's a big issue for her. She's not down with Medicare for all, I don't believe. She's a little more centrist than, say, an Elizabeth Warren, than, say, a Kamala Harris, okay? Gillibrand also kind of in the middle, I think. Tulsi is, on issues of war and peace, Tulsi is a pacifist, but on everything else, like LGBT and stuff like that, she's got a very checkered past. So these are the choices we're going to have. But as far as the economy goes, and as far as somebody who understands economics and teaches it at Harvard, as far as somebody who actually created the Consumer Protection Bureau, which was destroyed after they removed Richard Cordray and put in this freedom cracker, Mick Mulvaney, who's also acting chief of staff. I mean, this guy, we had the Grammys last night, but when we have the Oscars, they ought to give him an award for Best Actor. Because he's acting all over the freaking administration. Acting. In fact, everyone in Trump's administration, just about, is acting. So it's a very sick administration, but I will say Elizabeth Warren was insanely good this week. And this speech that she gave, and I just want to play you a little bit about, what the corruption is, and that, they're still calling Donald Trump, the candidates are calling Donald Trump a symptom of a corrupt system. He is not a symptom. He is the result. He is the result of the disease. He's not a symptom. He's the result of Newt Gingrich's ridiculous assault on the middle class. They called it contract with America. We called it contract on America. And Grover Norquist, who makes people of the Republican ilk sign a pledge that says that they will never raise a tax, ever. And that includes closing tax loopholes. And the stats now that are out that show what happened to us, the middle class, since 1987, the stats are stunning. I'll just give you one of them before we get real deep into it, because this is important for you to know. Now that you understand this tax cut for the wealthy was exactly a continuation of this attack on us who work for a living, who are middle class if we're lucky, who are striving to be middle class if we're not so lucky. The opportunities in America have shrunk for people like us. There's no question. That is true. So here, the 400 richest Americans, I don't even know how to say this number. Somebody will tell me. 0.00025%. What is that number? I know that 0.1 is 1/10 of 1%. I know that 0.01 is 1/10 of 1/10 of 1%. But when you start adding all those zeros, I have no idea what that means. But 0.00025% of our population, 400 people, have tripled their share of America's wealth since the early 1980s, while 150 million others of us in the bottom 60% of wealth distribution saw our share of the nation's wealth fall from 5.7%, which is what we used to be able to lay claim to, down to 2.1%. That's all we own. So what does that translate to? The top 1/10 of 1%, okay, own 20% of the nation's wealth, which means that the other that the bottom 80%, or as I like to put it, everybody else, the top 1/10 of 1% owns more than everybody else combined. That is stark. And everybody knows how frustrating it is now. Everybody's got 2 jobs. Everybody's got 3 jobs. Everybody's like, I can't afford childcare. I can't afford a nanny. I can't afford this. I can't afford that. I can't afford healthcare. Right? And there's a reason why. And it was by design. And all Donald Trump is the culmination, the result of a corrupt Republican Party that decided to transfer all the wealth from most of us, the lion's share of us, to their donors, to their backers, to their supporters, not their constituents. Oh no, oh hell no. The concentration of wealth in this country has returned to the same level as it was in the roaring freaking 20s. So I guess in the coming 20s, you should take, heart that will have legitimate legal liquor.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Today, millions and millions and millions of American families are also struggling to survive in a system that's been rigged by the wealthy and the well-connected. Hardworking people are up against a small group that holds far too much power, not just in our economy, but also in our democracy. Like the women of Lawrence, we are here to say enough is enough.
It's a good slogan. I like it.
We are here to take on a fight that will shape our lives, our children's lives, and our grandchildren's lives just as surely as the fight that began in these streets more than a century ago. Because the man in the White House is not the cause of what is broken. He is just the latest and most extreme symptom of what's gone wrong in America.
He's the result.
A product of a rigged system that props up the rich and powerful and kicks dirt on everyone else. So once he's gone, we can't pretend that none of this ever happened.
Yep.
It won't be enough just to undo the terrible acts of this administration. We can't afford just to tinker around the edges, a tax credit here, a regulation there. Our fight is for big structural change. This is the fight of our lives. The fight to build an America where dreams are possible, an America that works for everyone. And that is why I stand here today to declare that I am a candidate for President of the United States of America.
Number 4, Klobuchar was number 5. We have 5 women. I think she gets it. I really do. I think she understands that the 400 richest Americans, we looked it up. It's, what was it, Scott? The top 25 1,000ths of a percent. Was that
25 100,000th of a percent.
Oh my God. Oh my God. They own, they have tripled their wealth since Ronald Reagan. They have tripled. And you know what's really sad about that number? You know, but it's not that they're, you know, we've learned this, weirdly enough, from Donald Trump, that being super wealthy does not mean that you are good with money. It means that you were born with money, which means politicians will work to get you even more money. And that's the sick system that we are striving in. This is the sick environment in which we wake up every morning at 6:30, 7:30, 8:30, whatever it is, and go to work and work all damn day and come home and bring groceries and cook dinner and feed the family and clean up after dinner and then start it all over again. That is the sick system. And if you're lucky, you're starting it all over again. Some people will do all that and then leave for their night driving job or, you know, their Uber job or their 7-Eleven job or their... Now, Donald Trump eats McDonald's, but he's never been inside of a McDonald's. He doesn't give a damn about the wages of the person who makes his 300 hamburgers that he feeds to Clemson, right? He doesn't care. But here you have this statistic. The top 1% of the population has more money than the bottom 80% combined. And like the 80% is misleading. It means everybody else. And we must have well, it's going to end up either one of two ways. We're either going to end up with an FDR-like president, or we're going to end up with a Robespierre-style revolution. And you know, color me crazy, but I would rather have a Green New Deal and new green jobs that pay a lot of money, and the wealthy, like over $50 million, pay another 2 or 3% in taxes, so that we can have an economy that works for everyone. We can have an economy that guarantees health care to everybody. Or we can have a place where we have those 400 richest heads in straw baskets. Up to you. And color me nuts, but I would rather avoid the 400 heads in a straw basket thing. And I would much rather get on with being in the 21st century with an economy that works for everybody. And meanwhile, if you're expecting a tax refund, you better check that list of the 400 richest Americans, because if your name's not on it, your odds of getting a refund just tumbled. Oh, my God. The Trump tax cut, remember he promised you $4,000? You would get $4,000. And then, Paul Ryan, by accident, told you the truth that it would be about $1,000 and said, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for you. For you. $1,000 is a lot of money for you. But, a billionaire shouldn't have to pay $1,000, extra. I mean, it's just such a sick, twisted, sales job that they do. But here's what happened. People didn't understand that they needed to change their withholding on their W-4 forms. And only the stat that came out from Home Depot that employs, hundreds of thousands of people was that only 1% of the people working at Home Depot bothered to go to human resources, which is gross. That's such a gross expression, human resources. We're human beings, for God's sake. But anyway, only 1% of the people at Home Depot went to human resources to change their withholding. And Trump wanted it to look like you were getting more money in the same way that stupid comb over makes him look like he has more hair. And truly, the reality of it is much uglier than you think. So a lot of people, like 4 million of us, who always got a tax refund, are going to end up writing a check this year to the IRS. It's very twisted. So his biggest achievement was to be a con man. It was to fool the people who voted for him into thinking that he gave them a tax cut. I mean, it's just so sick and twisted, but, here he was selling the tax cut, and when he realized that the middle class was bitching because they didn't get anything, he lied, and he said they're putting in a new tax cut for you. They're putting in a middle class tax cut. They're going to put it in.
Under the plan moving forward in the Senate, a typical family of four earning $75,000 as an example will see their taxes go down by as much as $2,000. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Now, we're doing that not just to help people. We're doing that because it helps our country. You're going to take that $2,000 and maybe you'll save some and you're going to spend some. And we're going to make product back in our country again. It's going to be made here. It's going to be made elsewhere, but it's going to be made here. We're opening up plants. We're opening up factories, and we're going to be great to small business.
Yeah, I'm a small business. He wasn't great to me, okay? He really wasn't great to me. He was great to real estate. All these pass-through companies, lawyers, pass-through companies, yeah, their taxes went way down. Mine didn't budge. But this was him selling his tax cut, okay?
When government loosens its grip, there is no summit we cannot reach. Our tax cuts will break down, and they'll break it down fast, all forms of government and all forms of government barriers, and breathe new life into the American economy. They will unleash the American worker. They will tear down the restraints on discovery, innovation, and creation, and they will restore the hopes and dreams of the American family. Millions of middle-class families will win under our plan. And today we are honored to hear from a few of those wonderful and truly great families. Bryant and Ashley Glick, right? Are from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I know it well.
How do you know it well?
They have two beautiful children with a third on the way. Bryant manages a farm equipment store. Ashley works in healthcare. This year they were in the 15% tax bracket. Under our plan, they will drop to the 12% bracket. It's a big drop. Instead of itemizing their deductions, they will be able to file their taxes on a single little beautiful sheet of paper.
Were you able to file your taxes on a single beautiful little sheet of paper? Because I was not. I'm still working on mine. I don't even know what the damage is yet. Anybody? A little single beautiful sheet of paper? I just... and then he realized that the middle class wasn't going to get, so he decided that he would put in. I'm going to put in, is what he said.
We are looking at putting in a very major tax cut for middle-income people. And if we do that, it'll be sometime just prior, I would say, to November. And are studying very deeply right now, round the clock, a major tax cut for middle-income people. Not for business at all, for middle-income people. Kevin Brady's working on it. Paul Ryan is working. We're all working on it. And we're looking at a major tax cut for middle-income people who need it.
What was your time frame for that?
I would say sometime around the 1st of November, maybe a little before that.
Well, it's now February, and they didn't get around to it, and Paul Ryan's gone, and yeah, it's just unbelievable. This is just the sickest thing. It's just so unbelievably wrong. He just lies and lies and lies. So here's the deal. When the Trump tax cut went into effect, they rejiggered the IRS withholding table. So if you've been taking the extra couple of dollars every week and buying yourself a beer, you already blew through your refund. Congratulations. And the richest Americans have tripled their wealth. Wow, what a plan. What a plan. So 4.6 million people who have gotten tax refunds their entire adult lives are going to be forced to write a check for the first time in their lives to the IRS on April 15th, assuming the government is not shut down. What a great president he is. Oh, you wanted somebody who would shake things up? You got shaken down, loser. You got shaken down. These numbers are staggering. Now, I have a longer clip of Elizabeth Warren laying out what's actually happened to the middle class, to the people who hope to be in the middle class, to even the people who thought of themselves as the upper middle class, versus the real household wealth of the top 1%.
To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. All right, I want to play you this. This is long. It is long. But I like the longer clips because the news, the news will show you a little snippet, say she announced, and not tell you what her platform is, what her policy positions are. This is a woman who, the first time I ever heard of Elizabeth Warren was she was campaigning out there for her Senate seat, and she was explaining how at Harvard she was teaching a course on economics, obviously, and she was showing students how credit cards worked or don't work. It's VIG, man. And how you could never get out of credit card debt, and that the actual contract that comes with your credit card, all that tiny little print that you couldn't read when you were 22, and now you really can't read, even in good light, that wasn't even that contract made no sense, that it was ridiculous, and no one, not even Harvard professors of economics, could figure out what the deal was. All right, so that's how I first know her. So I like listening to her speak about the corruption and the economy. And I like knowing that she believes that extreme wealth in this country, like 50 million and above, ought to be taxed at very high levels. And that the amount of wealth that is concentrated in the hands of the uber wealthy has cost us trillions of dollars that we could put to use for healthcare, for education. You think about trillions of dollars that just fly out the door with Republicans, not just in the form of tax cuts and tax loopholes and tax avoidance schemes and all of that, but in the stupid wars that they fight. And everything that they do doesn't prioritize us. So we live in the richest country in the world, and it doesn't provide every citizen with health care. We live in the richest country in the world, and you have people in Virginia and people in West Virginia and people in Mississippi who still have undiagnosed ringworm. You see what I mean? You have people that have one good tooth in their head because they can't go to a dentist. You got people sitting around going, what'd you say? What? Because Medicare doesn't even cover a hearing aid. This is wrong. So I want to play you this clip of her explaining to you what the hell is wrong.
I've spent most of my life studying what happened to families like mine, families caught in the squeeze, families that go broke. And what I found was that year after year, the path to economic security had gotten tougher and rockier for working families, and even tougher and even rockier for people of color. I also found this wasn't an accident. It wasn't inevitable, no. Over the years, America's middle class has been deliberately hollowed out, and families of color have been systematically discriminated against and denied their chance to build some security. Now, it started very quietly. The richest and most powerful people in America, they were rich. I mean, really rich. But they wanted to be even richer, and they didn't care who got hurt. So every year, bit by bit, they lobbied Washington and paid off politicians to tilt the system just a little more in their direction. And year by year, bit by bit, more of the wealth and opportunity went to the people at the very top. And that is how today In the richest country in the history of the world, tens of millions of people are struggling to get by. Since the early 1970s, adjusted for inflation, wages in America have barely budged. But the cost of housing has gone up nearly 2/3. The cost of college has nearly tripled. And 40% of Americans couldn't find $400 to cover an emergency. That is millions of hardworking people in this country whose lives would be turned upside down if the transmission fell out of the car or somebody got sick and missed a week at work. The middle class squeeze is real, and millions of families can barely breathe. It is not right. It's 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 not right. Now, this disaster has touched every community in America. And for communities of color that have stared down structural racism for generations, the disaster has hit even harder. Take home ownership. The number one way that middle-class families build wealth in our country. Back in 1960, it was legal to discriminate against families of color. And the gap between white homeownership and black homeownership rates was 27 percentage points. That's a lot.
It is a lot.
Over time, we changed the law to prohibit that kind of discrimination, and the gap began to close. But today, the home ownership gap between black and white families is 30 percentage points, bigger than it was back in 1960 when housing discrimination was actually legal. Race matters, and we need to say so. Be blind to the fact that the rules in our country have been rigged against other people for a long time. Women, LGBTQ Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, immigrants, people with disabilities, and we need to call it out. But over the course of a generation, the rules of our economy have gotten rigged so far in favor of the rich and powerful that everyone else is at risk of being left behind. Listen to this. In the 1940s, 90% of all kids were destined to do better than their parents. By the 1980s, the odds had slipped to 50-50. And now, we could be the first generation in American history where more kids do worse than their parents. And meanwhile, the rich and powerful seem to break the rules and pay no price. No matter what they do, they grow richer and more powerful. Bailouts for bankers that cheat, tax cuts for companies that scam, subsidies for corporations that pollute. That's what a rigged system looks like. Too little accountability for the rich, too little opportunity for everyone else.
I loved it. I loved it. Because she's absolutely correct. I mean, this is the dynamic that we have in America. You know, you have this rising wealth inequality, and it's, you know, it's not a zero-sum game. While the rich are gobbling up a larger share of the national wealth pie, the real problem is our wages have stayed stagnant. Incomes at the top, at the very top, have risen exponentially, dramatically over the past few decades. You know that CEOs used to make about 44 times what a guy on the floor makes. And now the CEO takes home There's not even a number for it. There's not even, and our incomes have pretty much stayed stagnant. Maybe you saw a 2% increase, a 2% increase, but I want you to know that over the same time period, okay, 30 years, the average wealth of the top 1% of households more than doubled from $10.6 million to $26.4 million. And the wealthier aren't just becoming wealthier. It's happening at the expense of everyone else because the wealthy are the ones who are the powerful, and the powerful purchase the policy. And so we're in this endless spiral that's just sucking the lives out of us. Jeremy in Illinois.
Hello?
May I help you?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Hello.
I mean, I hear you using these stats and stuff like that about, the 1% making more. But in terms of what that means for me, I mean, for example, I don't see how they are stopping me from making as much money as I want to make.
Oh, really? So how much interest do you get on your savings account?
How much interest do I get?
Yeah.
I think it's, I don't remember. I don't know the exact number.
Well, it's not even 3%. It's probably not even 2%.
What does that have to? That has nothing to do with
because they are
that.
making 25% on their income. The top 1%. The top 1%.
Okay.
Do you own a home?
No, I do not.
Okay. Well, that's the biggest creator of wealth that there is. And why don't you own a home?
Because I'm living with my parents right now.
Because you're why?
I'm living with my parents right now.
Why? How old are you?
I'm about 18 years old.
Oh, there you go. So you have no idea what the economy really looks like when you get out there. But I will tell you this. If you go to college, you'll graduate with a negative household income. You'll graduate with, some sort of $100,000, $40,000 worth of debt, where the very wealthy, they are debt-free from the get-go. Now, how much power do you think you have?
No. But
how much power do you think you have to affect policy? Like, for instance, you're going to have to pay for health care once you're 26, okay? You're probably on your parents' health insurance right now, which is a good free ride for you. But that free ride ends when you're 26 years old. So that takes out, I'd say, at least a good chunk of your take-home pay, okay, that you have to pay a premium.
I understand. I understand this. But look, I'm trying to figure out.
And then on top of that, you have to pay out-of-pocket expenses. And then on top of that, you have to pay like $6,000 in deductibles before your insurance actually kicks in. Now, why do you think it's that way?
Why do I think it's that way? I don't know why so.
Well, then what are you talking about? If you don't know, why don't you just listen?
What I'm trying to figure out is how
the
much
reason why it's like that. The reason why it's like that is because the powerful affect the policy. How do they do that? They give money to politicians, and they tell politicians all we're interested in is a loophole in the tax code that says that me as a multi-billion-dollar corporation pays zero taxes, and Jeremy in Illinois is going to pay 15%.
Which billionaire pays zero in taxes?
General Electric pays zero in taxes.
They pay zero in taxes.
Yes.
Well, they're a publicly owned company anyway.
And Jeremy, if you go to work, if you work, then you're going to have to pay, I don't know, like 15% for FICA, for this, for that, plus sales tax when you shop, plus gas tax and all that. And guess what? They pay zero. So you're paying for them to take tax cuts that are borrowed money from our treasury, and we pay the interest on it. Isn't that a good deal?
No.
So that's what I'm saying. Wake up, because you're only 18 years old. You should just listen right now, because you don't understand the world and how it doesn't work for you. Chris in Rochester.
Hello there. Yeah, you're right. People are drinking their $20 they got of the week.
Right.
So, I do tax.
And I want Jeremy just to understand this, that if I inherit money and my money is, making 26% interest in the market, or I'm making 18% or 15 or 7 or 8, right? My money is being taxed at a lesser rate than his money, and he's going out and working a job. Now, why does he think that it's that way? It's because the richer you are, the more policy you can buy. So Jeremy is going to have to pay for all of their largesse. I mean, it's just a ridiculous system.
Yeah, because investments don't get taxed the same way as everything else
work.
does. Yeah, as you know, those who labor by the sweat of their brow, and in this tax code, are the ones that get it. Pardon the expression. Well, you know where they get it, and it's disgusting. And I'm seeing people that are coming in. You know, some of these people normally get like $1,000, $1,200, and some of them. I get people. Oh, I'm going to get a new used car to them, new to them, and they owe $150, and they go, well, I can't pay you because I don't have the money. I wasn't expecting to owe the IRS.
Right,
so
nobody was.
I'm sitting on returns that people won't pay for because they walk out of the shop going, I didn't know I was going to owe. I'll catch you later on in the year.
Yeah.
So put me on extension. Put me on
I know.
extension.
I know.
This is nuts. It's a goddamn grifting.
Meanwhile, you've
of the
got
people
these.
of the United States.
It is, and you've got these multi-billion-dollar corporations that, because of all the loopholes that are built into the tax code, because of the reduction in their bracket, right? Their
and they just keep smiling.
Their effective tax rate. Their effective
did.
tax rate is 0, and Jeremy's effective tax rate is 12%. Now, why is that fair?
It's not.
Of course, and he doesn't realize it yet because he's still living in, his parents' house, and he's 18 years old, and he thinks that, raising, I don't know, Jeremy, it does affect. Here's a simple one for you to understand. The minimum wage in this country hasn't been raised in 10 years. Why is that? Because giant corporate interests don't want it raised. They don't want it raised. They don't want their costs to go up, even though their tax burden is going down. And so you, at a minimum wage job, are going to make $7.25. You do the math. 40 hours a week, what are you going to make? $280 before they take out your taxes. How do you live? Well, you don't. You stay in your parents' house. Tell me how you're going to afford to pay health insurance on an income like that. And tell me why you're going to pay tax on that, but GE pays 0.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
I am tired of hearing that we can't afford to make real investments in childcare, college, and Medicare for all. I'm tired of hearing that we can't afford to make investments in things that create economic opportunities for families. I'm tired of hearing what we can't afford because it's just not true.
Senator Bennett, that's the base of the party wants that. What are you going to tell a voter that wants that when you say it's not, you're not going to be able to get that?
Well, first of all, I'm tired of hearing all that stuff too that Elizabeth said. I completely agree with her. Think about what we've done since 2001. We've cut taxes by $5 trillion. Almost all of that went to the wealthiest Americans. We've spent $5.6 trillion. The president says $7 trillion on wars in the Middle East. So that's 11, 12, 13 trillion dollars that we did not spend to address the most important issue facing this country, which is our lack of economic mobility and the huge income inequality that we have. So I actually agree with all of that, and I think it is the guy that was in this chair right before me, who's now the president's chief of staff, who was one of the people in the Freedom Caucus who tortured President Obama over and over and over again, called him a Bolshevik and a socialist and all this stuff, couldn't lift a finger to help when we were in the worst recession since the Great Depression. They now have given us the biggest deficit that we have ever had in a period of economic growth. A Republican president, a Republican Senate, a Republican House. The fiscal hypocrisy is unbelievable, and I think that's what Elizabeth Warren was responding to, and I totally agree with her on that. The question is, how are we going to make these investments in a way that the solutions will actually endure?
Yeah, we have to make it in such a way that the next president, after we actually, start taxing $50 million and reinstate the estate tax that affects like 1/25,000th of 1/10th of 1%, right? I mean, how do we write it so that it endures and it can't be undone by a president who comes in and swears to Grover Norquist that he will lower taxes for the uber wealthy again, so poor Jeremy has to live in mom and dad's basement for the rest of his life. Here, Jeremy, here's an easy one to understand. So like I said, you want to go to college. Let's say you know, that's your hope and dream. You want to go to college. You think you're going to be a young professional and da-da-da-da-da. So you have to pay for college and you borrow money. And that money, I don't know, maybe it's got 18% interest on that loan. Meanwhile, your money in the bank is making less than 2%. So you graduate college and you have $100,000 worth of debt at 18%. Now, on the other hand, I'm sitting in the same college you are because I'm also equally smart, but my parents gave me all this money. We both graduate. You go out for work, I go out for work. But you have to pay back your $100,000 at 18%, and I don't. Do we have the same opportunity? No, because I'm going to go buy a house, and I'm going to go buy a car with my professional income, and you're not, because you're going to be indebted to the bank before you can ever apply for a loan for a home. You see what I mean? That's what we're talking about when we say the middle doesn't have the same kind of opportunity as the top 1/10 of 1%. And the reason is because of the tax code. The tax code is the vehicle by which all wealth is transferred. Either it's transferred from the Treasury to the working people, or it's transferred from the Treasury to war, or it's transferred from the Treasury to the uber rich, or it's transferred from the Treasury for the purpose of getting the effective tax rate of multi-billion-dollar corporations down to 0 or below so that they get the refund and you write a check. Same opportunity? No. And why? Because they, the wealthy, not only have a say in our economy, they have a say in our politics. And you get drowned out. So nobody gives a rat's ass, Jeremy, if you think you're paying too much on your credit card. Nobody gives a rat's ass, Jeremy, if you think that college is unaffordable. Nobody gives a rat's ass that you're going to be charged 18% interest on that student loan where somebody else isn't going to have a student loan. Nobody cares that your house, some appraiser comes and says your $200,000 house is really worth $400,000. You should borrow to get the money out, pay off your student loan, and then turns around and says, oh, we're sorry, your house is actually worth only $200,000, and that $200,000 that you borrowed, you now have to pay it back at 10% interest. This is the economy in which people are working their asses off. And you mentioned Jeff Bezos. I guess because he's in the news. Let me tell you something. This thing that's going on with AMI and Jeff Bezos, those are rich people problems, Jeremy. That whole thing that's taking up all the oxygen on the TV, those are rich people problems. Somebody hacked into Jeff Bezos' text messages, and somehow they ended up in the possession of the National Enquirer. It turns out that probably it was the girl that he's cheating on with his wife. Turns out it might be her brother. Now, the only reason why the Enquirer goes to a guy like Jeff Bezos and says, we're going to publish more disgusting stuff about you, more embarrassing stuff about you, is because Jeff Bezos can pay them not to. He chose to confront them and say, I don't care, I'm not embarrassed, go for it, print it, I don't care. Well, let me tell you something. When Gawker published something really ugly about me, they didn't come to me and ask me, did I want to pay them to kill the story? Because I didn't have much money. What these two people are doing, what Pecker and Bezos are doing over dick pics, Pecker and a dick pic, oh, their jokes just write themselves. But what they're doing is a rich person's problem. That is not my problem. And Bezos, by the way, is so anti-union. Jeremy, I want to know, when you go to a job and they offer you $7.25 and you do this really, really great job for them, you go over and above. Let's say you're hired as a burger flipper or the fry guy, because I was the fry guy. I was actually fired from Burger King because I couldn't stop eating the onion rings. Literally. I was fired for that. But let's say I did a great job and I didn't eat the onion rings. Let's say not only did I run the fry station and keep it clean, and all my customers got their onion rings and their fries with their order on time, and I was totally in sync with the burger wrappers and the burger, the flame broiled guys and all that. And I had so much free time that I went out and I cleaned the tables. And then as we were closing, I filled up all the ketchup. I refilled the salts. I did everything else. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go I'm going to wash the windows. But nobody gives me a raise. What's my leverage? How do I negotiate a better salary? Even, I've shown that I am the hardest worker on the planet, but they won't give me a raise. Where's my leverage? So, Jeremy, I want you to open up a newspaper and realize that teachers that teach you have been on strike all across this country. And today we've got a teacher strike in Denver because teachers get paid nothing. Nothing. And 92,000 kids have to go to school today, and they're all going to have non-union substitute teachers, or scabs, as we like to call them, getting in the way of a group of people bonding together through their union to negotiate a better deal for them. Because not only are they teaching 7 classes of 40 kids a day, but they have to mark your papers. They have to read all your reports. They have to chase you down when you're late. They have to figure out if your parents are drug addicts. They have to figure out why you fidget so much. They don't have guidance counselors. There's one school nurse for 2,000 kids. Wake up, Jeremy. Just wake the F up, okay? Yes, it all actually is a rigged system. And yes, it's going to be hard for you to get out of mom and dad's house. Our goal is to make it better for you. That's all we care about here. It's making it better for you. When you graduate, I don't want you to have a student debt at 18%, $100,000 on your back before you can even make a home mortgage application. Okay? And I don't want you to have to pay $2,000 a month for health care that still you're going to have to spend $6,000 out of your own pocket before it kicks in. And I don't want you to find out that you have some autoimmune disease and the drugs that you see on TV that say, oh, I can give you clear skin or I could give you, relief from this, that the copay for it is $1,700 every 3 months. That's what we all deal with out here. And it's wrong. Julio in Fort Lauderdale.
Hey, Randy.
Hello.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Oh.
I'm old school. I go back to the IOD days when you were with Neil.
Yeah.
I actually bought your video, the one that you made for Camilla's
Oh, my
house.
God. Goddess of the Nighttime, Volume
That's
1.
right,
As if there would ever be a Volume 2.
I mainly bought it because the picture on the back, you were wearing a green dress, and you look quite smashing.
You know where that was? That was on the field in the Joe Robbie, when it was still called Joe Robbie Stadium. And Dan Marino, I was carried out onto the field in like an empress's chair.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
You look really cute. I always stayed with you.
I had that big old beehive hairdo, kind of like Amy Winehouse before Amy Winehouse ever thought of it. Except, I don't know, I wasn't on heroin, and I still, it was bad. It was bad.
I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the reason I'm calling is you were talking about taxes.
Yeah.
I did my taxes.
Yeah.
Last year had 17, 1,700. This year, $800.
So I'm telling you, where's your tax cut? Where'd your tax cut go?
They're killing me.
Yeah.
And my wife and I, we've been trying to get her disabled for the last 7 years, and we had to get an attorney. So I just hemorrhage money when it comes to health care.
Oh, me too. Health care is so expensive for me too.
Oh my God! It's outrageous.
I know. Mine is $2,000 a month with a $6,000 deductible and co-pays as far as the eye can see. I told you, I went to the eye doctor and it was $100 copay.
Jeez.
I know.
It's outrageous.
It's bizarre, and it keeps us from being in the position we should be for working this hard.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I work an average of 6 days a week. I haul fuel.
Oh, God.
10 to 12-hour days, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's the only way I stay afloat. You know, people talk about, oh, it's so easy to be disabled. I've been fighting for disability for my wife for the last 4 years.
Oh, I know.
And it's like pulling teeth.
It is. It's horrible. It's absolutely frightening. And, you know, for us, where are you? And you live in Florida? You file in Florida?
I live Sunrise.
Okay, so that's where I used to live too. 9860 Northwest 25th Street. Anyway, so people that live in Florida don't have state income tax. But look at the people in the high state taxes. Look at New Yorkers and look at people in California. They just got ripped off. They can't now deduct the state and local taxes that they used to be able to, but the very, very wealthy just had their tax rate taken down 20 points.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's wrong. Honestly. It's just wrong.
You know, let me tell you, when people talk about there's not enough money in healthcare, I always tell them, I pay from my pocket. My employer pays me. Then from my taxes, you get VA, you get Medicare and Medicaid because that comes from the state. We have the health care program for the young, and then most counties have a half a penny to help pay for their, you know, like Jackson or something like that. So I'm getting screwed 7 different ways. You're going to tell me there's not enough money?
Yeah. And you look at the money that they give away. $5 trillion transferred from the Treasury to the very wealthy. And then, you know, maybe $5.6 trillion for these stupid wars that we did not need to fight. That's real money right there. That's the cost of a healthcare system.
Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
There are 2 big projects for America, I think, on healthcare. One is covering everybody. It is a disgrace that we are the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't cover everybody. And the other thing we need to figure out how to do is not spend twice as much on healthcare as any other industrialized country spends on healthcare to get worse results. That's what we're doing as a country. We got to figure out how to do those 2 things. And I actually would give the Nobel Prize to whoever can figure out how to do those 2 things. Right. But just speaking personally, I think the idea that we're going to go out and offer to take insurance away from 180 million people. You mentioned the Affordable Care Act. Right. Remember when President Obama said, if you like your insurance, you can keep your insurance. And then, a few people in America actually lost their insurance because of the way the plan worked. Now what Democrats are saying is, if you like your insurance, we're going to take it away from you. From 180 million people that get their insurance from their employer and like it. Or 20 million Americans who are on Medicare Advantage and love it. That seems like a bad opening offer for me. I think we'd be much better off with a bill like the one I have with Tim Kaine called Medicare X that creates a public option. It helps finish the work of Obamacare, and it says to America, if you want to be in a public plan, you can choose to be in a public plan. If you want to keep your insurance, you can keep your insurance.
I want to be in a public plan. I would rather be in a public plan and have absolutely no premium at all and get a supplemental plan for a quarter of what I'm paying now. That's what I would want. Because no matter how hard you work at the end of the month, there's that health care freaking bill. And then no matter how healthy you are, you know, something does that. You break your arm, you go to the emergency room, you get a bill. All of a sudden, it's like, $4,900. Well, then you say, well, at least I have insurance. Oh, no. $6,000 deductible. That $5,000 comes out of your pocket. And guess what? There'll be interest on that, too. What a system. It's so rigged, Jeremy. I'm not yelling at you. I'm just telling you, listen, learn, wake up. Because you're a young man. And hopefully you have desires and you have dreams for yourself, like, I don't know what you want to be, a doctor, a lawyer. I don't care what you want to be. But you'll start off your career in debt. And other people will start off their career not in debt. Do you have the same opportunity they have? Hell no, you don't. And God forbid you get sick along the way. Oh, my God. You have no idea, Jeremy. Joe in Fort Pierce.
Hi.
Hey.
Oh, I'm so glad I found your show. You really speak very clearly about the problems and whatnot. But anyways, what I want to know is that why with all of these connections and problems that we see with Trump, I mean, every action he takes is either self-serving or for his children, and we have proof that he was working on this tower thing. It's all, it seems impeachable, and yet we're doing nothing. And now we have at least a Democratic Congress to start something. I know we have a Senate that's still dominated, but I think we should at least start an impeachment.
Well, we had a government shutdown for 35 days. So,
I know.
Right. So they got a little bit of a late start. They just started the oversight hearings. And, right. And so that's happening. And now they've passed the transcripts on to Mueller that they, needed to pass on to him so that they can figure out who lied and who didn't. And, so it will start. But remember, this is, again, a legal thing where the House indicts and the Senate tries, right? That's how that goes. And you know how things are in a court system. I mean, it's just so freaking slow. Nothing happens overnight. You have to first have hearings. You got to get people on the record. You have to then, check the veracity of what they said. And if they lied, then you have to move to impeach them. And it's not easy.
But it's so obvious. It seems aggravating.
I know.
I mean, with this hotel, he gets all these foreigners in. They're not knocking foreigners.
Well, listen, he keeps saying there's no collusion, no collusion. Are you kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? His son met with Saudis. His son met with Russians. His son is meeting with, they're exchanging emails. You got people that are talking to WikiLeaks. You got people that are talking to Russian intelligence operatives. You got direct messages. We have all kinds of corruption and collusion, and it's a conspiracy.
And domestic corporations, what was the phone? That phone thing there, whatever it is, they're spending 50 nights. All these people at this hotel, and they're spending.
I know you. Yes, the pink shirt telephone guys.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, they're going to get their approval. I mean, come on.
I know it's pay for play. The whole thing is rigged. The whole thing is broken. But the thing is that there are very few campaign finance laws left. Okay, so the only one that we really have. I mean, you could pay to play. You can literally do it. It's legal now. So because they say money is speech.
Yeah.
Corporations are people, and the way that they speak is with money. Oh, bite me. When a corporation has a colonoscopy, then it will be a person, and not until then. Okay? When a dollar bill has breast cancer, then it will actually have speech rights. Other than that, this is bullcrap. But this is what they've talked everybody into believing with stupid, slogans from con men all along the way, from Newt Gingrich on down, right? And so this is where we ended up. So we only have one campaign finance law, and that's no foreign money. Well, I just know that was violated, and that is the problem, and that's what you...
man.
That's the one you have to prove.
Yeah.
So...
you make so much sense. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. Thanks for finding us. It was a happy accident, but thank you.
Oh, man. First day. I love it.
Oh, that's great. That's great. First day.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome. That's really awesome. Here, well, let me play you Adam Schiff, okay? Trump keeps saying the Senate cleared him. The Senate cleared him, okay?
The president keeps implying that the Senate Intelligence Committee has already found no collusion. He did it again this morning in a tweet. He did it yesterday, I think, in a tweet. And he's naming Richard Burr by name. What is your understanding of where and how closely are you working together with the Senate Intel Committee?
We are trying to work collaboratively with the Senate. But look, I think when the president says there's no collusion, what he means is Bob Mueller has not yet proven beyond a reasonable doubt that I am guilty of the crime of conspiracy.
Right.
Well, that's a pretty high bar. But when people say there's no collusion, they must have a different word for the kind of corrupt coordination of effort between the Trump campaign and the Russians, because when Mike Flynn was secretly talking to the Russian ambassador and trying to undermine bipartisan sanctions on Russia and lying about it, that was a form of collusion. When the Trump family and campaign manager were meeting in Trump Tower to get dirt on Hillary Clinton as part of what was offered as the Russian government effort to help the campaign, that was a form of collusion. When the president himself and his business are trying to make money from the Russians and get Russian help during the campaign and promising a new relationship with Russia and talking about doing away with sanctions, that's a form of collusion. It's certainly a form of corrupt combination, but ultimately it'll be up to Mueller to determine if that's a crime.
You were among the most public in questioning Donald Trump Jr.'s honesty when it came to the response to the meeting at Trump Tower, and even the response. And you talked about some blocked phone calls, blocked calls that imply that he might have actually been talking to his father. There's since been some reporting that the Senate Intel Committee has uncovered who those blocked calls were to, and they were not to the president. Are you satisfied with that explanation?
Well, we haven't been able to get the records yet because Republicans on our committee wouldn't allow us to. But our job, and this is very important, Chuck, it is not to prove the president did money laundering or prove phone records will show this or that. It is to find the facts and make them public, whichever way they cut. Now, the people who were closest to watching father and son during the campaign, people like Steve Bannon, have said that there is zero chance that Don Jr. did not discuss that meeting with his father before it happened or after.
Should you have waited till there was evidence before speculating about that?
The point I made was not speculation. The point I made was we should find out. We should get those records. And you can't run a credible investigation if you don't look for documentary proof, if you assume everybody who comes in your committee is telling the truth. We have seen graphically the problems with that approach.
Yeah, and that was the problem, because, you had, Devin Nunes, who's probably, just as greased by various foreign cash contribution. You got the NRA also, taking all this money, some of it laundered from Russians. Very little. Not even a nickel is allowed, but, But here you have a nice little, 3-point plan here. You had conspiracy with the Russians to take sanctions off with Mike Flynn. Obviously, he's got text messages, all kinds of, and he's cooperating, right? You got the Trump Tower meeting, which obviously was to get dirt on Hillary Clinton. And we know Trump Jr.'s response to that offer was, if it is what you say it is, I love it. That is an in-kind contribution from a foreign, never mind government, a foreign adversary. So right there, you do have a crime. And then, you've got the Trump Tower deal that was going on during the entire campaign while Trump was out on the trail saying that he had absolutely no deals that could happen in Russia, that he wouldn't know who to talk to in Russia. All lies. And remember, Richard Nixon was impeached. One of the articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon was that he was lying to the American people to obstruct his investigation. So that's in bounds. That's why on Friday I played you Barbara Jordan, who was just one of the most amazing women to ever serve in the House of Representatives. And she, she came from the deep, deep South. She was the first African-American woman from the deep South to ever serve. And she was a lawyer. She was brilliant. And we lost her too soon because she had MS and leukemia. But honestly, that woman was a powerhouse, and she understood what the founding fathers meant by impeachment. They actually said things like, if the president behaves amiss, that was the criteria for impeachment in the Constitutional Convention. So if the president behaves amiss what? A Miss Universe? I mean, it really pays off his mistresses. Wow. During the campaign. All right, Amy in Nutley, New Jersey.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Randy, long time no see. I was going to give Jeremy a homework assignment. That he should look up. A long time ago, Warren Buffett wrote an op-ed about his effective tax rate versus his secretary's effective tax rate, and he paid something like 11%, and his secretary paid 13%. Because he is a corporation, he's incorporated.
No, it's because he makes his money on capital gains, and capital gains, which is money that makes money that pays you. That is called capital gains. And capital gains are taxed at a lesser rate than actual work.
Right.
So if your money is making money, you're taxed less than if you are putting your back into it every day, or you're driving a truck every day, or you're typing every day, or you're doing spreadsheets every day, or you're an accountant, or you're a coal miner. You're paying more taxes than somebody who's running a hedge fund, than somebody who's got his money in the stock market and makes money off of his money. That's wrong. You should incentivize work. We should make it so that most people, like the 90% of us who actually work and don't make money off of money, have at least an equal deal. That's what he needs to look up. Chad in Cleveland.
Nope. Patty in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh.
Sorry, I just stepped into a public. Hey, a lot of people don't mention that there's so much insurance money that's built into, like, personal liability, into your homeowner's insurance. If somebody gets injured on your property, you have to pay their medical bills. If you hit somebody with a car, you have to pay their liability insurance on that. Every store you go into, there's liability insurance built into everything you buy at every store. If everybody had insurance, you wouldn't have to be paying those insurances, as well as not having to pay all the private insurance companies.
Well, that's a very good point.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of insurance. All the schools that you go to, the city parks, everything. There's liability, injury liability built into all of that. If we had just Medicare for all, everybody would be insured. Anybody could go to a doctor. The only thing you might have is maybe a negligence or something, like if you put iron spikes in your garden or something, somebody fell on them. But, I mean, we save so much money.
Well, there's a million ways that we get trapped into paying for other people. I mean, it just is. And the thing I always tell everyone who listens is stop looking down. Stop looking down at this person or that person that is sociologically or economically or power-wise. They are below you. They're not doing anything to you that is worth a damn, okay? The people that are crapping on you are above you. They're peeing on you and telling you it's raining. Stop
looking. They're taking a profit.
I'm just saying, stop looking down. That's not where the problem is. And look up. That's where all the crap is coming from. We are downstream of all these people's poop. Yep. And unless and until people start understanding that the kind of politics we have in this country is to make people feel just a little bit more superior than this person or this group or that group, that is not going to solve your problem. It's not going to solve their problem. It's not going to solve your problem. It's not going to solve your kid's problem. It's not going to solve your mother's problem. No, the people that are doing this are above, up there, peeing all over you, laughing their asses off, and telling you to look down, and it's this guy down here, or it's that one in the South, or it's this black one, or it's that brown one at the border. Bull crap. Bull crap. We're all together in this trying to live thing.
It's the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Our priority is to make sure the President of the United States is working in the national interest, that he is not motivated by some pecuniary interest or fear of compromise or actual compromise. That's the length and breadth of it. So in terms of the President's business, we're not interested in our committee in whether he's a tax cheat or he's not worth what he says he is or those issues. What we're interested in is, does the president have business dealings with Russia such that it compromises the United States? And the perfect example is something we know about already. And that is, as a presidential candidate, while he was telling the country he had no business dealings with Russia, He was pursuing the most lucrative deal, I think, of his life and seeking the Kremlin's help to make it happen.
Yeah.
That's a different form of collusion, but it is equally compromising to the country because it means the President of the United States is looking out for his bank account and not for the United States of America.
Exactamundo. Exactly. And that is just the result of years of Republican corruption. You know, there's in the homework section, okay, if you go to randirhodes.com for the newbies, okay, and for the Jeremies, and for our new listener, yes, single. We have one new listener today. You know, I self-deprecate, but if you go to randirhodes.com and click on the homework, you will see in the homework section today an article that was written by Tom Mann and Norm Ornstein. Now, why is that important? Well, it's old. When is it from? It's from 2012. Now, the reason why Thomas Mann and Norm Ornstein are an important duo in writing about the corruption that seeped into the United States beginning in the 80s and culminating in craziness by 2012 is that Norm Ornstein works for the right-wing American Enterprise Institute, and Thomas Mann works for the left-wing Brookings Institute. And the two of them, back in 2012, came to the same conclusion. And the same conclusion they agreed on was, let's just say it, this is the Republicans' fault. They are the problem. And they start to explain to you in this very easy-to-read, albeit 7-page article, that the Republicans began this onslaught, this attack on the middle class, hollowed it out, and decided that our money belonged to the rich. Our money needed to be transferred to the wealthy. Why? Because it would guarantee them Republican majorities in the future. Because if you gave them the rich money, the rich would then give the legislators money. It would give Congress members money. It would give the senators money, and it would pay for presidential campaigns. And so after 40 years of expanding economies, 40 years of incredible home ownership in this country, 40 years of people being able to go to college and become professionals, become doctors and lawyers and engineers and software people and all these things that people could afford, they decided, oh, we'll always have a Democratic majority because people are very satisfied with the economy. They're very satisfied with things like Bill Clinton balancing the budget. They're very satisfied with no debt. They're very satisfied with peace and tranquility. They're very satisfied with a burgeoning middle class and their children doing better than they can do, than they did. We have to change the dynamic. We have to frustrate these people. We have to put them in a terrible position of scraping by and tell them the Democrats did it. And the only way to do it is to enrich the wealthy. And so we started seeing this massive transfer of wealth in this country. And it started with Newt Gingrich, and it never stopped. It never freaking stopped. Now, these guys have been studying Congress for more than 40 years, one from the right and one from the left. And they said in 2012 that they had never seen our Congress. They had never seen our government this dysfunctional. And that was in 2012. That was pre-Orange Man. That was pre-Orange is the New White. That is pre-Trump-Panzi. That is pre-Cult 45. That is pre-Maggot. They said it was bizarrely dysfunctional then, so they tracked it back. And what their conclusion was is that the GOP is an insurgent outlier in American politics. That if the people of this country understood that the GOP was always engaged and has been engaged since the 80s in a massive transfer of wealth from the middle class to the donor class, they would reject it. They would reject it. Here's what they wrote. They wrote, what happened, okay? This is what happened. They said, there were larger forces at work beyond the realignment of the South. Okay, they talk about how the Dixiecrats joined the Republican Party. after the Civil Rights Act in the 60s. And so the Democrats were free of that kind of racial conservatism. Racism. The Democratic Party was free of racism. And, it really irritates me that they will not call us the Democratic Party. They call us the Democrat Party because it sounds like rat. And they keep doing it, okay? But that said, they said that post-McGovern, the Democratic Party lost the bulk of the conservative Dixiecrats because of the Civil Rights Revolution. And so the Democrats had a much more diverse base, and they were able to govern for a much more diverse population, and it really paid off. It paid off all throughout the 60s, the 70s, until we got Ronald Reagan. So they said there were larger forces at work beyond the realignment of the South. They included the mobilization of social conservatives. They had all the racial conservatives that left the Democratic Party and became Republicans. So now they needed to broaden that from just the racists to something more. So they started with, in 1973, they started beating the drum on Roe v. Wade. It's murder, it's murder, it's murder, blah, 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 right? Birth control, women coming into their own, having control over their bodies. This was big. This was a big issue for the right wing. And then 1973, Roe v. Wade. And then they started the anti-tax movement in California, by the way, in 1978, Proposition 13. And they got people to believe taxes were bad. And then you had the rise of conservative talk radio. And then in 1989, Congress gave itself a pay raise. Wow. That was all the right wing needed, and they sold that to the American. You see, they're getting rich, and you're not, and you're not, and you're not. That was the big issue, and so it became the topic of right wing radio, believe it or not, and right wing blogs that started showing up in the 90s, right, and all this. But it really starts with Newt Gingrich and Grover Norquist. That's when, in 1979, Newt Gingrich had this strategy to create a permanent Republican majority in the House. And the way that he did it was he convinced voters that Congress was so corrupt that anyone would be better than the Democratic majority. Anyone, including racists and people who wanted to take away the ability for a woman to choose the time and place that she would become pregnant. So they mixed the social conservatives with the racial conservatives, with the people who just felt that, they used to do the pork reports and the waste report, and he would harp on that and say, and yet Congress is giving itself a raise, right? It took him 16 years of pounding that drum, but he started bringing ethics charges against Democratic leaders, and he provoked them into overreactions. And he united the social conservatives and these racial conservatives against Democrats by exploiting scandals to create more public disgust and to run against Washington itself. And it took him 16 years, but he accomplished his goal. He got a Republican majority in 1994. But the forces that this man unleashed were forces that said that no matter what a nonpartisan outfit, told you about climate change or about, the spending or about the fact that, immigrants who are here undocumented pay more taxes than they cost, he would get them to deny science and facts and everything else. And Grover Norquist in 1985 started this thing called Americans for Tax Reform, and he rolls out this pledge that made anybody who wanted to run for office in the Republican Party pledge that they would never raise a tax, not one tax, not even close the tax loopholes. And they went around and they got almost 238 of the 242 House members to sign on to those pledges. And then they started adding more and more litmus tests. So another one was, Roe v. Wade. You had to be against it. And another one was climate change was a hoax. Even back then. And if you didn't want to be primaried by a right-wing lunatic who was who's a bigger lunatic than you in the GOP, you had to play ball with Newt Gingrich and Grover Norquist. By the time we got to Obama, these Republicans were so unanimously opposed to any progress only because we had a Democratic president, okay? The filibuster, which was used, it was used on a handful of major national issues in any given Congress. It became the routine weapon of obstruction to the point where the Senate Majority Leader, that turtle man, Mitch McConnell, literally refused to confirm a Supreme Court justice for an entire year simply because Obama had picked him. And this guy, Merrick Garland, as we all know, was a very centrist, middle-of-the-road justice. He would have been right down the middle. And then we had another crash, and people, they were able to convince the Tea Party. They created this new group called the Tea Party. I swear to God, you had these people out there screaming they didn't want health care. They did not want affordable health care. Oh, my God. And not only didn't they want affordable health care, but they wanted the rich to pay less taxes. I mean, these guys were con men. They were literally saying that the rich should pay less. And they were out there, these ordinary Joe the plumber guys who worked for a living were out there saying trickle down will work, even though it didn't work in the 80s, even though it didn't work in the 80s so much so that Ronald Reagan had to raise taxes. We actually had Republican co-sponsors in the Senate to create a debt reduction panel in 2010. And even though the Senate Republicans were the ones who wanted that, the Democrats said, yes, that is a good idea because look at Bill Clinton. He had a balanced budget. It can be done. We should do this. As soon as the Democrats were for it, the Republicans were against their own idea. Obamacare was right out of the Heritage Foundation. Obamacare was Mitt Romney's adaptation of a Heritage Foundation plan that he adopted when he was governor of Massachusetts. And as soon as Obama was for it, the Republicans were against it. That is their own plan. That's how bad it's gotten. And we had the biggest crash, the deepest economic downturn since the Great Depression on their watch, with them in the House, with them in the Senate. I mean, it's just... And they wouldn't raise taxes because they were scared of being primaried by Grover Norquist. So, their intolerance for fact, their intolerance for the middle class, their intolerance for science, their intolerance, they have become an apocalyptic cult. They have become authoritarians. They have become the fascists of 20th century Europe. These Republicans, instead of, my father going over there to beat back the Nazis, these Republicans would follow them right into Europe. They would follow them right into the UK, right into Paris.
I don't think he should do that. I think it's a bad precedent.
We got to be very careful about endorsing broad uses of executive power.
This would just be another erosion of congressional authority in this particular area.
The real concern that I have is the precedent that this then sets.
I think that's dubious from a constitutional perspective, and I hope that the president will not go that route.
Yeah, never mind. Happy Friday, you bastards. We're right at the beginning of a constitutional crisis. Are you enjoying it yet? Do you feel it? Are you feeling it? Do you feel it? You'll feel it by the end of the explanation today. You'll feel it. This is unbelievable. Trump went to the Rose Garden today. He riffed for about 50 freaking minutes, almost an hour, and he sounded like a moron. He sounded like a crazy person. He sounded like the worst of the worst who are, just deployed to the streets because we have no place to take care of them. And then they end up mumbling and talking to themselves, pushing a shopping cart with tinfoil on their head. That is what the president of the United States sounded like. And the whole world heard that. The whole world heard that. Everyone from this dictator Maduro to Orban in Hungary to the white supremacists in Poland, everybody heard what this president said and how he said it, and that he has absolutely no clue what he's doing. All he knows is that he was losing and lost an argument over a campaign promise that Mexico would pay for some stupid wall on the border. That's all he knows. He lost some stupid argument with Congress about they then paying for his stupid wall, meaning we then pay for his stupid wall. Okay? This is all he knows. He's losing, he continues to lose, and that he ended up with less money than they promised him the first time. Listen, this is a man who is such a terrible, terrible negotiator. I mean, he's got to be the worst of the worst. God help him if he had to really earn his way, make his way without, rich parents. God help him if his father wasn't who his father was. This man would be somewhere in Lower Manhattan with a shopping cart with all his belongings in it, walking around the streets, asking, buddy, can you spare a dime? Well, now it'd be $4 for a cup of coffee. Thanks, Starbucks, Schultz. No, he asked for and received, this is the sick part, $25 billion from Congress in exchange for the DACA protections to, the people who are protected under the deferred action for children of childhood arrivals, for those kids to have a path to citizenship. That was worth enough to the Democrats to give him a whole $25 billion, and then he could figure out eminent domain. Then he could figure out what he's going to do about these landowners. They don't want no stupid, ugly wall or a freaking steel slat fence, painted or unpainted or rusty or not rusted, on their property, who like the fact that it's an open border, right? So let him figure it out. But what's really crazy is he turned down the 25 bill, and then he started, a new negotiation. He could have gotten 5.7. He talked them out of that too. So he ended up walking away. And this is crazy. I was reading I guess it was the New York Times, about the negotiations about the conference committee. There are 17 members of the conference committee that represented both the House and the Senate on this, and Democrats and Republicans. So you had 17 legislators all together crafting this bill. Charles Grassley, for example, was one of them from the Senate and the Republican side, and Nita Lowey was from the House on the Democratic side. And apparently they had this big negotiation, and they were able to get for the president, I think it was $1.4 billion. And so when Nita Lowey, said that everybody was on board for 1.4, she kept that to herself, and she went into the room and she offered Grassley and the Republicans 1.3, 1.2. And Grassley said, I'll take it. I'll take it. That's like the scene that you play out in your head where you're negotiating with your boss, and of course you're not part of a union, so you have no leverage, but you know that you've done a great job, and that, everything they ever asked you to do, you did and more, and blah, blah, blah. So now you're ready, and you get up all your courage, and you go in, and you sit down in that chair, and you're staring down, the gates of hell. And you're like, I'm not taking a penny less than 50. I won't take a penny less than 50. And you sit there and you tell that to yourself, and you talk to yourself. You're like, I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to do this. And then your boss walks in and puts his little pencil down on his desk and sits back in his chair and all cocky and snide and sneering and smarmy and says to you, all right, we're prepared to make you an offer of $42,000. I'll take it. That's what Chuck Grassley did. That's what Chuck Grassley did. He just keeps losing.
Let's say the wall costs $4 billion. They say $10 billion.
Watch this. Watch the
that
little...
means $4 billion, if you know what you're doing. $5 billion. Believe me, I'll build bigger, better, stronger for half the price.
The wall is going to cost $6 or $7 billion.
The wall's probably $8 billion. The wall's going to cost $10 billion. Maybe 12.
It's 1.4
2.5 for 2017, I think 2.6 for 2018.
Is President Trump willing to sign a government spending bill that does not include that money?
Yeah, we're putting down $25 billion for the wall.
Will you ask for $25 billion, Mr. President? Is that
asking.
Did Chuck Schumer offer $1.6
We
billion?
agreed
Did he
to
take it back?
$25 billion. Yeah, sure. He took it back, but
he took it back. How much did he agree to?
But he didn't really take it back.
We have asked for small amounts in 18, $1.6 billion.
When are we getting the wall? Well, we're going to get the Democrats have actually agreed to that, but I have to get more.
We put in $1.3 billion on the table.
No, not 2.5. No, we're asking for 5.6.
Are you willing to come up and give him some of this money for the wall? Because apparently that's the sticking point.
No, nothing for
It's $5.7 billion for a strategic deployment of physical barriers or a wall.
He's getting some down payment here. He's going to be able to build 55 miles of new structures.
We're building the wall, and we're using other methods other than this, and in addition to this, we have a lot of things going. What I say is what I say.
What does he say? He's the worst negotiator in the history of negotiating. He is absolutely bizarro world. So, in absolute abject frustration today, he knows that he had to sign that bill. And I told you what I would do if I were him. I would sign the bill. I would take their 1.3, and then I would declare a national emergency and try and raid the government funds. I would try and take the power of because he's an autocrat. And I would try and take the power of the purse unto myself and cut Congress out of the deal. Now, before I show you what he did today, to show you just what a loser we have as a president, just what an intellectual lightweight, what a moron, what a fantastical man who has a national emergency happening only in his head, does to make himself seem like a winner when he's truly a loser. Before we get into that, I got to explain to you that there is about to be an amazing 3-4 weeks. This is just going to take up the rest of his presidency. You understand? There's only two things left to his presidency anymore. There's the Mueller investigation, and whenever it wraps up, and all the contretemps over, whether or not our new Attorney General, Bill Barr, will allow the American people to see whether or not their president is a traitor. Okay? Because we know that the president's campaign manager is a traitor. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to defraud the United States. That is what Paul Manafort pleaded guilty to. So we know he's a traitor. We know Michael Flynn is a traitor because we know he was texting, some Russian counterpart that that sanctions would come off and, the Saudis would be able to get their nuclear reactor that was going to be built by Russia at the inaugural, right? That's our national security advisor. We know that Rick Gates, the deputy campaign manager of the Trump campaign, is cooperating with Mueller. We know that the president's attorney pled guilty and is cooperating. We know the president's foreign affairs policy advisors, Carter Page, is suspected of always being a Russian agent. We know that George Papadopoulos pled guilty to, talking to a Russian agent and lying about talking to a Russian agent. So we'll have to wait and see if the president knew about any of this. And that his son took a meeting and that the Russian government had written a couple of emails saying the Russian government would like to support your father and we would like to give you dirt on Hillary Clinton. And, what do you think of that? And, if it's what you say it is, I love it. But we'll have to see if Trump knew, about it. And then the other thing that's going to take up the rest of his presidency is this. And this is why this is so scary. Because Trump is not normal. Trump is not sane. Trump is not a person who is trying to serve the American people. And we know this because the American people do not want this stupid wall, and they want it even less if it meant that he had to declare a national emergency and take these powers that Congress has unto himself. Okay? People were, nobody, very few people wanted this wall to begin with. Very few people wanted him to take money from other places and put it into this wall. They wanted Mexico to pay for it, is what they wanted. And then when you throw in, what if he had to declare a national emergency? It's like 10%. It's so bad. Nobody wants this. But he keeps losing money, and so he decided today he would go out and he would declare this ridiculous national emergency where there is not one.
I'm going to be signing a national emergency, and it's been signed many times before. It's been signed by other presidents. From 1977 or so, it gave the presidents the power. There's rarely been a problem. They sign it. Nobody cares. I guess they weren't very exciting, but nobody cares. They sign it for far less important things in some cases, in many cases.
Oh, my God.
We're talking about an invasion of our country.
Okay, this is important.
With drugs, with human traffickers, with all types of criminals and gangs. We have some of the greatest people I know. They've been with me from the beginning of my campaign, almost from the first week.
And they're
the
not in
angel
jail?
moms.
Oh.
Unfortunately, we have new angel moms.
Oh.
One incredible woman just showed me her daughter, who we're talking about killed in the year of 18. I said, I haven't seen you before. She said, no, I'm new. I said, that's too bad. It's too bad.
Does he sound lucid to you? Yes. Lucid, he does? He sounds like he's sober? No, lucid means, cogent. Lucid means, you know what you're talking about, you're sharp, you're highly functioning, your brain is on task. That's lucid. In the year of 18, okay, what was important about that? This idea that he keeps calling it invasion, an invasion, an invasion. I don't know if you know the scope of powers that a president takes unto himself when he declares a national emergency. No one has ever declared a national emergency for a construction project. National emergencies have been declared for things like flu epidemics, pandemics, sanctions on various terrorist organizations, things like that.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Trump gets the money appropriated by the border security compromise bill and adds $3.5 billion out of the Defense Department's military construction budget, $2.5 billion out of the DOD's drug interdiction program, and $600 million out of Treasury's drug forfeiture fund. The president will then leave for Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach for the weekend.
It's a real emergency, everybody. It's a real emergency. What's really important about these numbers? These are the budgets he's going to raid. The first number is $3.5 billion in military construction. I don't know if you understand what's going on with on-base housing in this country. I'm not sure if you're clear about it, but yesterday I alluded to it. There was a hearing that was held, and it took testimony from military families at Keesler Air Force Base and Camp Lejeune and other military on-base housing units. And the stories that these military families told, and of course, he loves the troops, right? And I've told you a million times, everybody loves the troops when we're all nice and clean and shiny and we're deploying to whatever far-flung place they have decided, the commander-in-chief and the Congress have decided we should go to. Everybody digs us. Everybody loves us. You all fly a flag on your freaking cars. Oh, yeah. And God, when we show up in our uniforms at the airport, everybody's like, oh, thank you for your service. Thank you for your service, which is such a weird freaking thing to say to me. But when we come back missing a couple of limbs, or PTSD sets in, or we need some help or care because we've been exposed to, God knows, asbestos or chemical weapons or, whatever. Not so much. Not so much. You love us, not so much. And the commander-in-chief definitely, and this one is a bizarre, a bizarre exception. I want to show you what the testimony looked like in Congress from the military families about the conditions in which they live in on-base housing, while you think about the fact that this president just put us into a constitutional crisis by taking the power of the purse away from Congress, giving it to himself so he can reprogram $3.5 billion from military construction budgets.
I'm here today on behalf of military families of every branch and rank. We ask that you act on our testimony and ensure military families receive safe, habitable, and functional housing and a better, more accountable way to resolve problems that arise. I first became aware of the crisis-level military housing issues at Keesler Air Force Base, where termites fell out of light fixtures into our beds. During my 2 years of research and advocacy, I received hundreds of reports from military families of mold growth, rodent and pest infestations, moisture intrusion, lead and asbestos exposures, radon concerns, base contamination, and cancer clusters in their housing. I have felt the helplessness of a fellow Marine Corps spouse as she held her new baby and sobbed while we stood under a collapsing, moldy ceiling in her home at Camp Lejeune. I listened in horror as families at Camp Pendleton told of mice eating through pacifiers in their babies' cribs and electrical outlets catching fire due to wiring issues. Until recent media reports in today's hearing, our efforts to fight for safe housing were too often met with intimidation, personal attacks, and strategic attempts to discredit us and silence our voices. We are appalled by this response. Military families understand that quality housing does not mean entitlement to elegant mansions. We simply ask for homes free of mold, pest, lead, and other hazards.
Mold was growing out of the wall of our shower. When Corvius Maintenance came to address our work order for this, they told us, and this is a direct quote, "Let the mold just fall out." The utility room in our house was also my children's playroom where they played daily. In the utility room, I moved their small card table that was leaning up against the wall. The wall was solid black. The symptoms we had included constant sore throats, nosebleeds, brain fog, blurred vision, numbness, fatigue, debilitating headaches. Even the 4-year-olds complained daily of these headaches along with dizziness. Knowing headaches are not normal for a child of that age, I was concerned they may have cancer.
That's how our veterans, that's how our active duty military is treated. That's where they live. This is what they do. They have rodents chewing through their infants' pacifiers at Camp Lejeune. Termites falling from the ceiling, mold all over the walls, infestations, flooding, radon, faulty wiring, black mold, lead. And the president's going to take money out of military construction. Well, he was asked about this today by John Roberts, and his answer is, it's pathetic. This is a loser of a human. This is an idiot. Okay.
A lot of the money that goes to count toward your $8 billion is money that's being reprogrammed in the DOD budget. How can you guarantee to military families and to our men and women of the military that none of the money that would be reprogrammed to a wall will take away from other technology, other renovations, construction that is desperately needed in our military?
So, John, we had certain funds that are being used at the discretion of generals, at the discretion of the military. Some of them haven't been allocated yet, and some of the generals think that this is more important. I was speaking to a couple of them. They think this is far more important than what they were going to use it for. I said, what were you going to use it for? And I won't go into details, but
housing
didn't sound too important to me.
Oh, my God.
Plus, if you think, I've gotten $700 billion for the military in year one, and then last year, $716 billion. And we're rebuilding our military. But we have a lot. And under the previous administration, our military was depleted, badly depleted. And they weren't spending, they had a much smaller amount of money. So when I got $700 billion and then $716 billion, and this year it's going to be pretty big too, because there's few things more important than our military. I'm a big deficit believer in all of that, but before we really start focusing on certain things, we have to build up our military. It was very badly depleted. And we're buying all new jet fighters, all new missiles, all new defensive equipment. We'll soon have a military like we've never had before. But when you think about the kind of numbers you're talking about, so you have $700 billion, $716 billion, when I need $2 billion, $3 billion out of that, for a wall, which is a very important instrument, very important for the military because of the drugs that pour in.
Oh, my God.
And as you know, we have specific rules and regulations where they have drugs and what you can do in order to stop drugs, and that's part of it too. We're taking a lot of money from that realm also. But when you have that kind of money going into the military, this is a very, very small amount that we're asking for.
$3.5 billion is the money that was allocated for construction, military construction. This man does not understand anything about the military families. He doesn't understand that you could have as many jet fighters as you want, but if you don't have personnel who are ready to deploy, if you don't have personnel who are ready to service it, if you don't have personnel who are ready to operate it, fly it, maintain it, fuel it, whatever, and the readiness of the military is literally threatened because you now have the military families living in housing that is literally hazardous to their health. Did you know that in Fort Bragg they're experiencing an epidemic of infant death? Yeah. In one house alone, 3 infants died. In one home alone. There's this big report on ProPublica about these environmental hazards that are seriously hurting our military families, killing their children, cancer clusters and asthma and pneumonia from mold spores and all of this stuff. It's detrimental to the force readiness. This man doesn't understand one thing about humans and their integral nature with the equipment. This is all he talks about is missiles and jets because he thinks that's the sexy part. The people part, I'll just raid the budget. I don't care. And I swear to God, even Martha McSally, loony Martha McSally, who served in the military, she was a commander, right? Remember, Martha McSally lost the election to Kirsten Sinema, but then John McCain passed away, and so they got to appoint, the governor got to appoint somebody and he picked Martha McSally. So this is what she said to these military families.
I served 26 years. I never did live on base. But as a former commander, as a former fellow patriot as you are, I'm infuriated by what I'm hearing today. This is disgusting. When your spouses raise their right hand to make the sacrifices and serve for our freedoms and our way of life, you also stood up to sacrifice. And you knew there were going to be some sacrifices to your careers and to moving around and all that comes with it. But not this. They were maybe going to go live in austere circumstances when they deployed. But this is in America, and American families that are putting up with health risks and sickness and harassment. We went to the private sector because the private sector, unlike the bureaucracy of the government, is supposed to be better, it's supposed to be more innovative, more responsive, more able to do customer service for our troops and their families.
Yeah, right.
But instead, there's people that I hope look themselves in the mirror tonight and say, instead of being partners with our troops to make sure that our way of life is kept safe and free, they left you hanging.
Yeah.
It put you in harm's way.
You think?
This is so wrong and so angering to so many of us, and we have a lot of questions for the next panels and follow-up. If anyone in Arizona is listening, is having issues like this, I want you to please immediately call my office, 602-952-2410. But for those of you, even though your senator may not be up here, we have your backs. This is just the beginning.
Okay, I just want you to know there's nobody on this panel. Just poor Martha McSally sitting there all by her lonesome, okay, listening to these families tell their disgusting stories of sick children and infant deaths and husbands who are physically fit and, now they can't even deploy, they can't even go back, they can't even do their jobs because they're so debilitated by the diseases that their own house is giving them. And there's no place to go. You have this one family that testified, and there's no one there. There was no other Republican senator there. There was nobody there at all to talk to these people. But you had testimony from people who said that they're living in this house, and everybody was happy before they moved into this on-base housing, and then all of a sudden they saw all this black mold, and so the Army husband and the 4 kids, they move into a Florida They move into their Florida on-base housing in July, all right? And then right after they move in, these health problems like start mushrooming. One kid goes to the emergency room because they can't breathe. Another kid develops pneumonia. And then they look and they see spores. Actually, these photographs were shown at this hearing. Spores on the air duct. And spores on the subflooring, okay? They see mold below the floor. They start pulling up, the linoleum and stuff. And so a contractor is sent over to take a look at it. And the contractor sanded through the mold, but did not bother to cover the family's clothes, the family's furniture, the family's carpets. And so their home was bombarded with toxic spores. And they had to live in a hotel for 2 months while this mold remediation was going on. Except it wasn't remediation. It was just getting rid of the evidence and releasing the spores all over the house. So now after 2 months in a hotel, which, by the way, you pay for this housing. There's money that comes out of your little paycheck, your tiny little, military paycheck. They take a housing stipend out of your paycheck to live in these cancer cluster little homes. So finally, after paying to live in a hotel, they come back in October, and that's when everyone gets really sick. Now, all of a sudden, her husband can't breathe without an inhaler. He's got no history of any respiratory issues, not asthma, not nothing. The daughter, Elsie, her respiratory problems elevate, and it's all linked to mold. And now the family is forced to move off base. You have a 3-year-old kid who is now working with a diagnosis of chronic inflammatory response syndrome caused by a water-damaged home that produced mold. They present the Tampa doctor's letter to, I guess, Martha McSally, because she was the only one that showed up to take the testimony. This particular syndrome alters brain function and it destabilizes your autoimmune system. So the people who were living in on-base housing, they wanted to withhold their payments. They didn't want the stipend to be taken out of their paychecks. And the military commanders literally intimidated them and said, if you make one sound, we'll just get rid of you. We'll just discharge you. I don't want to hear a word about it. And they were threatened. They were threatened by the base commanders. They were threatened by their superiors. Fort Bragg, North Carolina, there's a woman named Heather Beckstrom. Her daughter suffers from epilepsy. Her son has a new cancer diagnosis. Her other son was born with a cleft palate, and the doctors believe it was all related to their untreated sewer water from their chronically overflowing toilet that sent several inches of water gushing onto the floor so frequently and so forcefully that the water line was visible on the stucco on the outside of their unit. This is where he's taking the money. I need you to know this is not like, oh, we have money laying around and it's doing nothing, and so I want to build a stupid wall that will do absolutely nothing to, stop drugs, which come through the legal ports of entry, because it's a multi-billion-dollar business that involves logistics professionals and logistics people who know how to build underground tunnel systems with fresh air and air filtration system. I mean, the tunnels for the drug smugglers are in better condition than the on-base housing for our airmen, soldiers, sailors, and Marines. And this is where he's going to take the money that has no prayer, no chance of stopping any shipments of drugs coming through the legal ports of entry in batches of cucumbers or cans of chili peppers or garbanzo beans or avocados. And then there's eminent domain. Oh my God.